Hello. So I thought I would do a short video today about kind of a follow up of the podcast episode that I just released. If you haven't listened or watched on YouTube the most recent podcast episode, I'll put a link above to it. And it was just exploring one of the real, more interesting concepts in a lot of these manifesting teachings, which is this concept that God is supply. You could say that God is my supply. Another way to look at that, if we're using more secular terms, like I said this in the podcast episode, is that your imagination creates your reality. Your imagination, I guess you could say, is your livelihood. That's the life-giving force. To quote Joseph Murphy about, the life-giving force, which is your subconscious mind or your imagination. But generally speaking, we use more religious terms, spiritual terms when it comes to these LOI ideas. That's what we hear more often. And we hear these great, powerful phrases about supply, like God is my supply. And there's just incredible depth there. That's what the podcast episode explored. And I was, reading from two of my favorite LOA type of teachers, H. Emily Cady and Joel Goldsmith, who are both just masterful at talking about how we can integrate and apply a profound idea like God is my supply more fully into our life. And I find when I talk about this stuff, most people aren't that interested. Because it's not sexy or enticing or marketable enough a concept to pull people in. Because it's very humbling. And it's also very truthful. In my opinion, you ponder what H. Emily Cady says or Joel Goldsmith, what he says. And you get quiet inwardly. And you touch the truth in some way. And that's always what's interesting me about these ideas, And, in my opinion, popular law of assumption, law of attraction teachers are doing that too. It's just that quiet truth that they're pointing at. People like Neville or Joseph Murphy or even someone like Abraham Hicks. That quiet truth is often masked by the sensationalistic marketing surrounding it. H. Emily Cady, Joel Goldsmith, it's hard to mask it. Again, because they use such non-sexy language, but very, very truthful language. And that's, again, what's interesting. That's what I love working with people on, what I love working on myself on. God is supply. If you don't want to use the G word, another way of saying it that's popular in these, you could say deeply spiritual manifesting teachings is consciousness is supply. My consciousness is supply. Very, very profound. But I think we have to contextualize it over and over again in this humble, truthful way, as opposed to this sensationalistic, marketable way, where it's like, oh, you're going to get something or you manifested something. I'm such a good manifester. It's not like that. when we get it all genuine about applying these ideas. So I thought I would read today from one of my favorite Zen books called Opening the Hand of Thought by Kosho Uchiyama. I might have read this passage before in a car video or even a podcast episode a long time ago. It's a phenomenal passage. Kosho Uchiyama was one of Kodo Sawaki's disciplines. If you're a long-time follower of this channel, you know that I mention Kodo Sawaki a lot. Great 20th century, both Sawaki and Uchiyama, great 20th century Zen teachers. And they really, they're not trying to market anything. They're just trying to share their truth in their own way. And what I'm about to read, I think, is very, very, very relevant to this God is my supply, or this idea of God, the Christ within us, being our Savior and our guidance ultimately, and our human side, our ego, as some people like to say, if we're using a psychological term, like, you know, it doesn't amount to that much. And if we realize that, then we become more comfortable with our ego. We become more humble and willing to look at our perceived flaws and not judge ourselves so harshly, because we know that there's something greater than us running the ship. And, you know, when I read like Joel Goldsmith or read H.M. Lee Cady, like that really comes through, you know. And, you know, honestly, like when I read Neville or Joseph Murphy or even Abraham Hicks sometimes with Abraham Hicks, you know, that comes through. But, you know, in these social media circles, it doesn't come through. It becomes about the ego a lot of the time. Listen to what Kosho Uchiyama wrote here in Opening the Hand of Thought. Uchiyama had he was well studied and well versed in Christianity as well as Zen. This is what he wrote. When you hear talk about ordinary human beings becoming great or gaining enlightenment, you can be sure it's not authentic. In Christianity, people don't talk about human beings becoming great. When people start talking about how great their minister or priest is, God gets lost in the shuffle. How great a human being can become is negligible. You have to remember that fundamentally, no matter what kind of circumstances we've fallen into, we're always living in the midst of enlightenment. Finally, to the extent we live in the world of letting go of all our own puny ideas, we live in the middle of enlightenment. As soon as we let go of our own insignificant ideas, we begin to see that this is so. We are always living out the reality of life. However, as soon as we start thinking and calculating about things, we become, in a sense, suspended from reality. That is, human beings are capable of thinking about things that aren't real. That is why I say that to realize the extent of our enlightenment is to see that proportionally, we aren't very enlightened. We have to be able to see that clearly. However much we become enlightened, it just isn't very much. Our practice begins to ripen only as we start to be aware that although we live in the midst of enlightenment, the little we become aware of in life is just scratching the surface. So I think that's a very sound approach to spirituality, and also a very sound approach to a lot of these manifesting ideas. If you have questions or would like help in terms of integrating this type of approach, I'm available for coaching and counseling. and I've written several books on the subject. You can find out more information or contact me at radicalcounselor.com.